Well, cash is always a bad investment.
Yes.
I mean, when people said cash is king a year ago, I mean, that's crazy.
Warren Buffett is here. As you know, he is perhaps the world's most respected investor. He is also chairman and CEO of Berkshire Hathaway. He has been on this program many times. I last spoke with him over a year ago at the peak of the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. At that time, he said that America had been struck by an economic Pearl Harbor. But much has changed since then, and he's here to tell us how he views a global and American economy in recovery. His own company reflects the progress made in recent months. Last week, Berkshire Hathaway struck a $26 billion deal to buy all of Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad, the largest acquisition in company history. He called the deal an all-in wager on the American economy. He's in New York for a town hall event that he held with Bill Gates at Columbia University yesterday. He graciously agreed to stay over in New York an extra night, and I am pleased to have a good friend of this program and a good friend of mine back at this table. Welcome.
Thank you, Charlie. I'm pleased to be here.
It's great to see you. It has been, certainly from the middle of 2008 to the middle of 2009, one incredible year.
One incredible year. And one to a lifetime, I hope.
Yes. Tell me about it for you.
Well, it really was an extraordinary time in this country. We came closer to a financial meltdown than certainly any time I've ever seen, and probably in certain respects there was even more panic than the Great Depression because it came on so fast and so unexpected, and the whole country wanted to deleverage, corporations, individuals, and fortunately we had a government that responded. And it was when we talked last that it was a little question of whether Congress would respond like they should. They finally did, and I felt they would in the end. I mean, in the end, they come together for things that are this vital to the country. But we had the right people in Washington. If we'd had a group that had behaved like a deer in the headlights, that deer would have gotten run over.
Yeah. So Paul said that this is something that goes with your philosophy today. Get out of cash and get into assets, because we don't know what's going to happen to the dollar.
Well, cash is always a bad investment.
Yes.
I mean, when people said cash is king a year ago, I mean, that's crazy. I mean, cash wasn't producing anything, and it was sure to go down in value over time. On the other hand, you always want to be sure you have enough. I mean, it's like oxygen. You want to be sure it's around, but you don't need to have excessive amounts of it around. And cash, we will always have enough cash around. But anytime we have surplus cash around, I'm unhappy. I mean, I would much rather have good businesses than cash. And we found a chance in the last year or thereabouts to deploy. We came in with something over $40 billion in cash, and we've got about $20 billion now, and we've had some earnings. So we put a lot of cash to work, and I like that. No, I'd much rather own a good business than have cash.
And it is a hedge against the dollar?
Well, you can say all assets are a hedge against the dollar. I mean, all you know is that the dollar is going to be worth less 10, 20, 30 years from now. I say worth less, not worthless. Right. You want to watch that. But it will be, and that's true of almost every currency that I can think of. The question is how much it depreciates in value. But cash is not a place that.
Now, why is that?
Well,
that
because
the dollar is going to be worth less.
Because we'll print more of them in relation to the amount of goods that are moving. If we dropped $1 million of cash into every household in the United States today, everybody would feel very good, except the people that invested in things that were denominated in dollars. And,
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, there will be no tendency toward deflation in this country over time, or in virtually any country.
Tendency toward inflation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think it's the same thing that makes most sense practically all of the time, and that is to consistently buy an S&P 500 low-cost index fund, keep buying it through thick and thin, and especially through thin, because the temptation gets, when you see bad headlines in newspapers, maybe to say, well, maybe I should skip a year or something. Just keep buying it. American business is going to do fine over time. So you know the investment universe is going to do very well. The Dow Jones Industrial Average went from 66 to 11,497 in one century, and then since that century has ended, it's more or less doubled again. American business is going to do well. The trick is not to pick the right company. It's to be, because most people aren't equipped to do that, and plenty of times I make mistakes on that. The trick is to essentially buy all the big companies through the S&P 500, and to do it consistently, and to do it in a very, very low-cost way, because costs really matter in investments. If returns are going to be 7 or 8%, and you are paying 1% for fees, that makes an enormous difference in how much money you have on retirement.
At the annual meeting for Berkshire Hathaway this year, you introduced a special guest to the audience of 40,000 shareholders who were watching. It was Jack Bogle. Why did you want to recognize Jack Bogle?
I think Jack Bogle has done more for American investors than any other person connected with Wall Street or the investment process, because he, with a number of other people, he came up with the idea of the index fund. He wasn't the sole thinker behind it, but he was the guy that implemented it and crusaded for it. But now there's trillions of dollars in low-cost index funds. Those people are going to have better lives. They're going to have better retirements. Their kids are going to inherit more money because of Jack Bogle and his efforts.
You have over $100 billion of cash.
Berkshire does that.
Berkshire. No, well, I'm going to see how much you got. Maybe you do. Berkshire has over $100 billion in cash, and you say that you always want this company to be a fortress. So how much cash should an ordinary investor have on a percentage basis, do you think?
It depends on their personal situation. If you're working in something where you're living off your paycheck from week to week, you want to have a little cash around, and you certainly don't want to have a credit card that's maxed out or anything like that. But if your house is paid off, if you don't have big living expenses, you got a portfolio of decent, diversified businesses, you don't really need any cash.
So you can be more cash-free than Berkshire is?
Yeah, I've got responsibility. We've got insurance claims. We could have hurricanes that, would happen. All kinds of things where we might have to pay out billions of dollars. And I've got over 1 million people that own shares that are counting on me to run the place so we get through periods like that. But if I were retired, I had say $1 million portfolio of stocks that was paying me $30,000 a year in dividends or something of the sort, and my children were growing, the house was paid off and everything. But, I wouldn't worry too much about having a lot of cash around.